I'm John Duval. Welcome to the Scriptural Way Bible Study. The Scriptural Way Bible Study is brought to you by the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ, located at 16300 North May Avenue, Oklahoma City. On behalf of the elders and members of the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ, I would like to thank you for your interest in spiritual matters. Now, let's take our Bibles and seek the Scriptural way. Good evening. I'm John Duvall.
I'm Dale Decker.
I'm John Hall.
We apologize for the few little difficulties that cropped up right at the very last minute. But thank you so much for joining us for our Bible study this evening. I was telling them that I had this all set up to go at 6:30. I think at 6:30 I started up the stream and we were good to go, and I switched the camera off just so we'd save the battery a little bit. And right about 5 minutes out, we lost the stream. So we rebooted the computer, got it back up, and we were getting ready to go. Travis says, "We have no picture from the camera." so we have it back on. Sometimes it just doesn't pay to gamble with your time, does it, Dale?
No, that's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight, too.
That's exactly right. Had to find a segue somewhere there. I want to thank you for joining us again this evening. We were absent last week. I was away doing a gospel meeting, and we are back. Everything went well. As I like to say, nobody walked out mad. The members were very receptive to the meeting and very, very hospitable. Very hospitable. Had a really good time with them. Y'all doing well, gentlemen?
Doing wonderful.
Good. John?
Well, I'm wonderful today, too.
Well, good.
It'll be wonderful with Dale.
You beat Dale in golf today?
He did. That's why he's wonderful.
Y'all didn't gamble on it, did you?
No.
Okay, good. Good. You'd have to go forward and meet me Sunday.
I would.
Well, you know, gambling is one of those subjects that Christians, they kind of, some are extremely strict on it. Some are extremely liberal on it. It's one of those subjects that you study the Bible and you won't find the word gambling anywhere. And I've heard people to justify gambling as a simple form of entertainment. I've known a few people who would say, well, I'm going to go to the casino and I've got $50. Now, whether I go to this casino or not, I'm spending $50. And I knew this band director years ago. That's what he did. They wanted to go to Las Vegas. He had never been. So he says, I'm going to spend $20. And I think he said he may have won upwards to $400 or $500, but he kept going till it was all gone. He just wanted to have the experience of doing that. But the majority of people who go for gambling, it is much more than some sort of entertainment. It's not like an amusement park. It's not like a movie theater. You know, it's not like going swimming, skiing, or anything like that. It is something that is above and beyond the normal, what we would call normal, self-indulging types of entertainment. And as a result, everybody, or not everybody, but the world paints the picture as if everybody does, and everybody loves to do it. So.
Yeah, it's a little different than golf even. I mean, when Dale and I went golfing this morning, I didn't go to win.
Right.
I went to play golf.
Exactly.
Now, and if I had won, which I won in the score, essentially, I didn't get any money for it. Dale didn't lose any money for it.
There was no bets. There was no,
right.
You know, you'll buy me lunch if I win today or anything like that.
Typically, I'd have to say, you know, just guessing 99% of those who go to gamble are going to win.
Yes.
They're not going to just spend $20.
Exactly.
And if they win $100, they're not just going to give it back.
That's right.
They're going to go away happy that they won, and they're going to wait till next time to hopefully go win some more.
You know, and statistically, it's not the wealthy of the world that keeps the casinos and so forth in business. It's those who don't have the money to go. And they go anyway. Yeah. Dale, any thoughts before we really take a look at what gambling actually is?
Well, we need to recognize the fact that just as we talked about previously in smoking, it is taught at a very young age because they had the candy cigarettes.
Right.
Today, when it comes to gambling, our children are taught at a very early age that gambling is acceptable. We do that through the school system because we use things such as raffle tickets and things like that. You buy this, you get your name put in for a chance to win a prize. Well, that's nothing more than gambling. But the little kids don't see that because they're taught that this is a charity function, that you're raising money for a specific thing.
Right.
But as they grow up and everything, they begin to realize that, hey, there's an opportunity for me to get something here for nothing. And in reality, it's not for nothing, because they have to buy that raffle ticket, or they have to buy that chance, as we call it now.
Right.
Same thing in gambling. We go and we play the slot machines or various things there. We go to the horse races, and you put money down trying to get something for nothing, or something from someone else, is what you're really doing.
That's right. That's right. Tell you what, let's go ahead and look at a definition, John, if you would, there, of gambling.
The word gamble and gambling, as we see here, are not found in the Bible.
Right, exactly.
However, the word defined is to play a game for money or other stake, hence to take money or any other thing of value upon an uncertain event, to hazard a wager or to wager.
Exactly. It's a very simple concept. It's where you put something that you stand to lose if you fail. And that's essentially what the idea of a gamble is. Mm-hmm. Now, some people will argue, though, but now isn't gambling no different than a risk? If I'm going to start a job, if I'm going to start a business, if I'm going to drive my car, I take my life into my own hands. If I'm going to invest $100,000 into a business, you could look at it as I'm gambling that money. But in reality, what we find is that with gambling, what makes it different than a risk is that gambling is typically based upon an arbitrary game of chance, whether it be dice or a roulette wheel or cards, something that is based upon chance, not upon strategy. And I'm not talking, you've got some people claim they can count cards and so forth, but when you start a business for yourself, you go about it with a strategy, with a plan, and it's not based upon arbitrary casting of dice to see whether or not you win or lose in that.
And the risk, such as farming or other things, is not based on somebody else's loss.
Well, that's a good point.
Whereas gambling, if you do gain, somebody else is losing.
That's right.
Somebody else is actually losing the money that they earned somewhere, or maybe gambled and won somewhere. But the only way you can win is that somebody else's loss.
That's right. Dell and I were talking earlier about a very popular commercial that kind of states the obvious problem with gambling. Would you like to share that with us?
Well, if you insist. It's definitely my favorite commercial, and a few people on our chat line tonight have heard me say this before. But the E-Trade commercials, whoever writes those commercials are sending messages that people should listen to. The current one right now is where the man is scratching off his lottery tickets, and you have to have 3 of the same item to win, obviously, and he scratches off 2, and he's all excited about the fact that he's got 2 that looks alike. And the E-Trade baby says to him, the odds of winning the lottery is the same as getting mauled by a polar bear and a common bear in the same day. And of course the guy scratches off the 3rd one, and sure enough, he loses. And so the E-Trade baby says, well, let me show you my shocked face. And he goes, ugh! Classic commercial.
Yeah.
Sends a message home. We need more commercials like that would help our young people understand that you cannot get something at the cost of taking something from someone else. We can talk about loss of others,
right?
But if you're in an athletic game or a sport, someone's going to lose.
Right.
But that's not harming the individual that loses. Oh, they may cry and they may get upset, and just like we saw in the NBA the other day, James Harden got elbowed and a concussion because the opponent was very upset. But the idea of gambling is actually costing someone something. And this is why in every state that starts up lotteries, every state that starts up casino gambling, always the first organization that they create is Gambling Anonymous for those people that become addicted to it, because people, just like alcohol and like tobacco, will become addicted to gambling.
You know what you normally would call something where you go in and you take something from someone that they're not willing to freely give you? Theft.
Robbery.
Exactly, burglary.
Yep, Alan mentioned go along with Dale said. Basically, yeah, the gambling goes along with addiction, and that's true. It's basically
That's right.
What evolves.
That's right.
After a few times. And Randall mentioned earlier as well. It seems like every state now has a lottery to raise money, and he threw in the last words there, which is really what the states point to for some good cause.
Exactly.
So it makes it all right if you're doing it for a good cause.
Yeah.
So
And
Robin Hood
always-
was okay because he stole from the rich for a good cause.
It's always education that they bring up. It's for
Yeah.
education,
Yeah,
and
that's
yet education gets very little of it.
That's right. Well, I tell you what, there's a lot more that we could say that's not even directly related to biblical teaching, just about the stupidity, behind the whole system. But what I like to do tonight is, we've already said gambling is not found in the Bible, the word per se. However, the Bible does establish for us several principles which, when applied within our lives, would rule out gambling. Let's begin with the first one. Now, this may seem to be very insignificant, and I would not use it as a singular argument against gambling. Yeah, gambling. However, when coupled with the other principles, it's a very good point. And that is, we need to look at what the Bible has to say about receiving gain. What are the ways in which we, through what we see in the Bible, can actually receive gain? One way, Dale, would be to prosper through labor.
Well, that's exactly right. And God expects mankind to labor. From the time that mankind was kicked out of the Garden of Eden, God told man that he would labor with the sweat of his brow. And the Apostle Paul has a lot to say about that. In fact, even when he was talking to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians, the 4th chapter, verse 28, he says, "Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need." And when people work for something, when they labor with their hands, at the end of the day, they can feel good that they accomplished something.
Exactly. I've earned it. I've worked for it.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are other passages that would basically paint the same picture there, and we know them very well. It is not an uncommon concept to see a man laboring and receiving gain for his labor. Straightforward concept. But there's another way in which we can receive gain, and that is through basically what we would call the exchange of something of value to buy and sell. If I have this and I want that, well, I'll exchange it for that. Or I will sell this so that I may go and obtain that. I'm not obtaining that through theft. I'm not obtaining it from taking it away from you, but we do an exchange or selling. John, let's look at Matthew 13, 44 through 46.
Okay, Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it."
Yeah, it's a very simple parable. And as a matter of fact, there is a meaning to that which really doesn't relate to what we're working on, but it shows an acceptance of the practice of selling what you have so that you can obtain something else.
Well, the idea is it's a win-win situation.
Exactly.
The person who's selling wins because they received a monetary amount for what it was they were selling. The person who was buying received a gain here as well, and won because they got something they wanted.
That's
but
right.
The fact is, both of them worked for what they got.
That's exactly right. And neither walked away unhappy because they each retained a value.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
John?
Randall pointed out Proverbs 12, verse 27 there in the chat room, which goes well with this, says, "The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious."
That's a very good point. The substance of a diligent man.
Daniel mentioned in the chat room a moment ago, he says he's also seen statistics that speak of the increase in crime with the addition of casinos.
Yeah.
And that can, I think, go basically without saying. If you just look at Las Vegas, what was the city like before casino came in? And then what kind of city is that today?
Exactly.
It's a city of crime.
Because take Las Vegas, for instance. You see on the surface level the bright lights, the dancing water fountains, whatever it is they have and everything. You have the floor shows, and you walk into these well-lit casinos where people are standing machine after machine after machine and after machine. What you don't see are the people who's panicking on the streets because they've just gambled away all their money. They're getting desperate because they don't have any money for food, and they go and they rob someone. Maybe it's for drugs or this. It's all because they went there with the hope of getting more, and now they're in debt, and they have nothing. And so with many people, that spawns the temptation to steal, to attack, to mug, or whatever.
I think another thing that kind of helps spawn that is the idea, when you get those casinos, especially in a place like Las Vegas or Atlantic City where there's a number of them together, so many people see the casinos making millions.
Right.
And they're just making millions by doing nothing, basically. I mean, they're just there.
What
people
service
come and
are they
give
offering?
Their money, right.
Yeah.
People come and give their money to them, and everybody sees this, and they want the same thing. They want to be able to make their money for nothing. So some gamble to do it, others find other illegal ways to make their millions, to make it rich.
That's a good point. And I think that's a very, very good point about casinos. What are they offering? They'll give you food, they'll give you something to drink, and some of them may have motels and so forth, but what is their bread and butter? What is it that if you took away and no one supported any further, that would end up closing the business? It's the gambling, the casinos.
Yeah, but how do they get people to come in for the gambling?
It's all the free stuff.
Well, not just the free stuff, but they will also have entertainment. You look at Oklahoma here, and believe it or not, Oklahoma has more slot machines than Las Vegas or Atlantic City.
Sure.
What they do in every one of these Indian casinos is they will have stars come in. Country and Western stars, and even some of the rock stars will come in. They charge a fee for that, but they're people that the American people enjoy hearing and will buy their records and stuff. They'll go in to hear that. Well, we're here, let's go ahead and play the slot machines while we're here. That's
exactly.
the reason and they do have the free buffets, the food.
But
all
it's
of
the
that
draw, though.
is to get them into there, because they know once they get them in, people, Mormons will not gamble.
Okay.
Absolutely will not gamble. And one of my bosses was a Mormon. We went to a meeting in Las Vegas. And believe it or not, the lure was so great for him that he actually put $1 into one of those slot machines. Never done it before in his life. Felt guilty about doing it, but he did it because the allure was there.
Yeah.
And this is what these casinos will do. They got to get you in there, and once you're in there, the excitement is there, and you just got to try it.
Exactly.
Randall mentioned that this is why it's called Sin City.
Right.
Exactly
Las
right.
Vegas. And it's just an atmosphere that the casino and the casino life has promoted.
Yeah. And the money that is won, what people do with that, oftentimes.
Well, of course, Las Vegas has been around much longer than any other place. Here in Oklahoma, the Indian casinos is fairly new. Atlantic City is fairly new. But you watch what happens. Nevada is the only state that I know of where prostitution is legal. And a lot of that is because of the casinos.
Yeah, that's sad. That is sad.
That was an interesting comment here. Well, first off, Randall mentioned the whole motivation of a casino, as we were mentioning, is just to keep you in the casino by whatever means possible. That could be food, drinks, free room, etc.
Right.
But they're still going to win. They can provide you all that, and it just makes it, now it just gives you more motivation to blow even more money than you would have spent. Because you think, well, I got a free room, I didn't have to spend $150. So you spend $400 gambling.
Right.
I got $10 of food, so you spend $50 gambling. I mean, they're making out there.
Yeah.
And then Alan has an interesting point. He says they also pump in oxygen, which keeps you awake longer to spend more money.
I wouldn't doubt
interesting
that at
idea.
all.
Yeah.
I wonder how Alan would know that.
Probably a little research.
Sorry, Alan, I couldn't resist.
I'm thinking you might have taught a lesson on this once or twice.
They have actually done, like on Discovery Channel and so forth, they've done shows about casinos and everything. So it is quite interesting to look behind the scenes there. More people need to realize what's going on. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and take our first break for tonight. When we come back, we're going to be looking at two other ways in which we can receive gain. Actually, one more way in which we receive gain through at least biblical examples there. And then we'll look at some other principles that gambling violates, and we'll look at your comments and questions. So let's have them. Let us know what you think about this, even if you disagree with us. We'd be more than happy to consider to talk about your position on it. So stay tuned. We will be right back.
Hello, I'm Ron Witt, one of the elders of the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ. On behalf of the elders and members of the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ, I would like to invite you to be our guest at any of our worship services and Bible classes. The meeting place of the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ is located at 16300 North May Avenue, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, zip code 73013. The Seminole Pointe Church of Christ meets Sunday mornings at 9:30 for Bible classes, 10:30 for worship service, and 5 p.m. for our afternoon worship service. We also have Bible classes on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Whether you live in Oklahoma City area or you are traveling through Oklahoma City, we would love to have you come and be our guest. We have Bible classes for all ages. At the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ, our focus is to teach only the Word of God. Rest assured that when you visit with us, you will find that we will appeal only to God's precious Word. Now, let us return to our study.
You know, there's another way, just by looking at cases in the Bible, that we can receive and gain. And we see examples of people giving out of the kindness of their heart, relieving distress. As a matter of fact, Travis, we looked at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. That very verse also serves as this as well. Dale, let's take another look at that one.
Paul says again, let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need.
Exactly. And even in the beginning of the church there in Jerusalem, in Acts chapter 2, verse 45 there, we find there that the brethren there, that they sold their possessions and their goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. Clearly a case in point of people who were willing to sell their land. Can you imagine someone owning some property and saying, you know what, I'm going to sell that and I'm going to bring the money and give it to the apostles so they can distribute to the needy saints?
You know, a lot of people, though, will use that concept as a reason for gambling.
Really?
You know, they'll say, well, I'm going to gamble,
Okay.
but when I win, I'm going to give a lot of it away. I'm going to give a lot of it to charities. You know, I'm going to do a lot of good with it.
Yeah.
And so basically what they've just done is they've said, you know what, I'm going to take money from those who need it, and then if I win it, I'll use that money that I took from those who need it, and I'll give it to people who need it.
Robin Hood.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it's not even worse than Robin Hood. They're not even taking it from the rich. They're
That's
taking
right.
it from the needy, as you mentioned. Those are the ones really buying most of the tickets.
You get into
'Cause they're the ones
lotteries.
that they're the ones that
That's
need the
right.
money the most.
Lotteries, casinos, exactly. That reminds me of, there's, I won't plug his name right here, but there was a financial guy who was talking on the radio one time, and he was talking about, there was some huge lottery or, jackpot, lottery ball, whatever they call it. And there were people lined up to buy tickets. And so this television anchor was interviewing this one fella. And this guy apparently identified himself to be some reverend so-and-so. And they said, well, why do you want to win the money? I want to win the money so I can help God out. And this financial guy said, help God out? What are you talking about? I mean, just is complete ludicrousy. What they do is they justify, like you said, they justify their participation with the claim that if I win, I'll help people out. And who knows? Maybe some of them might, but most of the time it's just a way to justify their hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chance mentioned in the chat room, he said a gambler once told him or suggested to him that money won was twice as sweet as money earned. And he said this contradicts God's proclamation in 2 Thessalonians 3:10 when it says, for even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat.
Tell you what, speaking of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, No, wait a minute. Wrong verse.
Yeah.
Very good. That was my segue point to the next section there.
Yeah.
Chance, that's a very good point.
No, he does skip a few points on the next statement, so we won't get into that one too deeply, but he mentions covetousness is at the heart of the potential game, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, if we got into that now, we'd have to end the study early. But that's right. But that's a very good point there. We need to make certain that we understand why we work and what's the purpose of what we do. Yeah. Well, the second thing that we do, second principle, Bible principle that gambling violates, has to do with gambling. We are not walking properly towards those who are without. Look there in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 10 through 12. And we're going to have up on the screen the latter half of verse 10 there, and we'll go through that. The Apostle Paul writes, "But we urge you, brethren, that you increase more and more, that you also aspire to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, that you may walk properly toward those who are outside, and that you may lack nothing." We're told that we are to walk properly towards people who are outside. He encourages us to increase more and more. We need to strive to live a quiet life. We need to strive to mind our own business. And we need to work with our hands, providing the things that we need. Gambling is the complete contrary to those things. Any thoughts?
Well, the idea is that people that are not Christians should be able to see Christ in us through our words and our actions.
Yeah.
And if we are out gambling, if we are out doing these things that we should not be doing, they certainly will not see Christ in us. Our young people walk around with a little quote, "What would Jesus do?" Certainly Jesus, there's no example in the Bible where Jesus was ever guilty of gambling.
Right.
Now, there are some people who might use this phrase, the apostles cast lots in Acts, the first chapter, to identify the next apostle that was going to take Judas' place.
Okay.
And they'll use that example as, well, that was a form of gambling. No, it wasn't a form of gambling. It's a lack of knowledge of what the Scriptures have to say.
Right.
But they'll use that to justify what they're doing to be okay.
Setting aside the possibility of divine intervention in that case, which I
Yeah.
suspect it was, obviously,
Yeah.
it'd be no different than you wanting to go eat at some barbecue restaurant in town, and I want Mexican. We'll say we'll flip a quarter for it. We both agree that if however the quarter wins, we'll go to that person's preference. That's not gambling. That's just a decision being made by chance.
Right.
And there's nothing there, that is not gambling, because there's nothing being put out on the table that you would lose. There's nothing like that. At least my understanding. Any thoughts, John?
I agree. Interrupt our point here for a question.
Go right ahead.
Randall asked a question for us. He says, if you just happen to say, I'm going to go buy Randall a ticket, and it happens to be the winning ticket, can Randall spend the money? And Daniel says yes, because it's a serious question. He's been asked this before, and Randall says he's also been asked the same, like on scratcher tickets for Christmas gifts. Somebody might give a scratcher ticket as a Christmas gift. If you do scratch it off and you win, is it okay then to go, you didn't spend the money to buy it, can you go in and cash that ticket in and take the money? I think that one's pretty obvious. If you reflect back on what the principle is with what you're doing with the ticket, you're taking money. Even if somebody else gave you the ticket, when you get the money, you're still taking someone else's money.
Yeah, that's I've heard that asked before, because you could get someone in the world who's not a Christian to go buy your lottery ticket and give it to you, and then you can spend it, and you technically haven't made the purchase and gambled the $2 or $3 away.
In principle, you've still made the purchase, though. I mean, you didn't spend the money for it, but the whole intention was for you to get the ticket, and you knew what was the money being spent for. And
I think, be honest with you, now this may not be the scenario that Randy's talking about. In the scenario that we just presented, covetousness still plays a part. You're just skirting the issue with having someone else do it. Randy's talking about someone who just comes up out of the kindness of the heart and say, here, I bought this lottery ticket, and maybe they know it's a winner. It's $4, here you have it. Maybe they don't know, but they don't really care about it, and they give it to you. I would have a hard time myself with actually turning that ticket in and receiving the prize money. I really would. Only because like you said, where it's coming from. It'd be different if a local bank was saying, hey, we're giving away $1,000. And so you go in and you get a ticket, hey, give it to your buddy, you just won $1,000. It's different. It's no gamble, there's no purchase, but the money that's coming from the funds are coming from all the millions of people that have pony up their $5, $10, $15, $20, however much they put it in there, in order to win. So I would have to say, looking at the principles there, that'd be a hard one to do.
Yeah, take that question one step farther. What if someone played the lottery and won $1 million?
Mm-hmm.
And you knew they won $1 million, and they said, hey, you know what, John, I just won $1 million. Here's $50,000. Should we take that?
Yeah.
I think we need to go back to basics on this thing.
You do. I would
Think
almost,
about this.
Yeah.
A person comes up to you, and oftentimes the employer
Mm-hmm.
might give their employees some lottery tickets. Okay? If we accept that lottery ticket, we have missed a great opportunity there to explain to the employer why it's wrong. By accepting the lottery ticket, we've actually encouraged that employer to go out and buy more lottery tickets.
Yeah.
Which
And-
fits in exactly with the section we're on, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what makes it wrong from the very beginning. I could not in good conscience accept a lottery ticket from anybody just because of the fact that I would be encouraging them to continue to sin.
Yeah. Because instead of because it'd be contradictory for you to say, you know what, I think what you did was wrong, but sure, I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, we could make this argument about, well, it was free, and if we win it, can we accept it? Well, here again, we've got to explain to everybody how we got this ill-gotten gain here.
Yeah.
Because someone still got hurt over the deal
Yeah.
because of all the money they put into it.
Yeah, and in the case
The point is, we got to go back to basics and
right.
make sure that we take the opportunity to teach at the very beginning.
and our light still shines.
Right.
Yeah. And what John was talking about, I would literally say, John, that's the case. That's an individual conscience at that point. And the person who won a great amount and they want to throw a little bit your way, that'd still be hard because of where it came from.
Yeah, personally, I would have a hard time
Yeah.
justifying taking that money.
Because again, you're saying, all right, now I think lotteries are wrong, and I don't want you to think that my accepting of it is condoning what you've done, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Right.
Or at least I don't think you could myself. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, Randall, just thank Dale for that good wisdom there and clarification. Chance mentions the cousins of gambling, and we were kind of talking about this a little bit when we talked about sin. But cheating, sleight of hand, deception, fleecing of our fellow man, crime, dishonest, and many dishonest elements, all cousins of gambling, all things that come along with gambling that we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And Daniel has a good question. Would you approach it the same as if someone were trying to give you a bottle of whiskey?
Well, what would be the purpose of the whiskey? 100 years ago, people would mix whiskey with honey or whatever for colds and everything.
I don't think he was talking about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the point that Daniel's making
I think it's a
there,
very
though,
good point.
is okay, I don't drink.
Yeah.
My employer wants to give me a bottle of wine. That's usually what they give. They'll give wine
that's a good point.
as a gift or as a welcoming to, say you have a convention or award program, and you go and you go into the room and there's a bottle of wine there. Do you accept it and keep quiet, or do you take it back to the boss and say, look, first off, I don't drink. Secondly, I think it's wrong to drink, and this is why I think it's wrong to drink, and therefore I will not accept this.
Could you cook with it?
Well, people do cook with wine. And
But again, you missed that good opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, exactly right. But the idea, since you asked the question, people will argue that when you cook with alcohol, that the alcohol is burned off. That is not true. The alcohol is still in there. Some is burned off, but there is still alcohol in there. It's the same thing as O'Doul's beer.
Oh, who?
O'Doul's is the name of it.
Okay.
It's supposed to be alcohol-free. But if you look at the fine print on it, it has 0.05% alcohol in it. They cannot completely get the alcohol out of it. And even to drink the O'Doul's beer, even if it was alcohol-free, it still has that name beer on it, and it still sends a message to people that it's okay to drink.
Yeah.
As Christians, we have to walk Just as Paul said here to the Thessalonica brethren, work with your own hands as we commanded you, that ye may walk properly, mind your own business, walk properly toward those who are outside
right.
the church.
And even if you perceive your actions in and of themselves you do not believe to be in violation of Scriptures, how will they be perceived by the people of the world? And what taste will that leave of you in their mouth, so to speak? And you have to think about those things. Even something that would be maybe a matter of conscience could very well mislead someone.
Absolutely.
One more point in regards to living properly towards those who are out. I like what Jesus said in Luke 6:31 and try to figure out how this applies to gambling. He says there, and just as you want men to do to you, do also to them likewise. It doesn't say just as men do to you, you do to them. It says as you want them to do to you, so do you to them. And so gambling goes against that. I don't know how many people who walks in the casino and say, look guys, I've got $1,000, I'm ready to lose, let's go. I'm going to give you $1,000. No, you go in there with the intent to win, to take from those. And as Christians, that's not the way that we live our lives, or should not be. All righty, well, let's go ahead and take our last break for the evening, and on the other side of the break, we'll continue with some other principles found within the Word of God that gambling violates, as well as looking at more of your comments and questions. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
Hi, I'm Rhonda. I'm a member of the Seminole Pointe Church of Christ in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Seminole Pointe Church of Christ has outstanding Bible classes for all ages. We have teachers who are dedicated to teaching God's Word in insightful and energetic ways. Please come visit us and bring your children. They will love our Bible classes, and you will be benefited.
Hello, my name is Dale Decker. I am one of 4 elders here at Seminole Pointe Church of Christ. We are very fortunate to have a Bible-loving group of Christians here at Seminole. Our Bible class teachers are second to none. We have Bible classes for all age groups. Our goal is heaven, and we make every effort to ensure that the Word of God is taught at every age group. We hope that you will come and check us out. You will find that we are a very friendly and loving congregation. We are located at 16,300 May Avenue in Oklahoma City. And now back to our study.
John just pointed out we had a question in the chat room from Paul Adams. Welcome to the study. Paul, it's okay to come a little bit late as long as you're here at some point during the study.
Paul asked the question again, have you already discussed the question of charitable drawings where you buy a chance like a raffle?
The fundamental problem with those, and I understand the point about the charitable drawings, the idea of charity. To me, the easiest answer would be, here's $10. I don't need a ticket. Mm-hmm. Let me just make a donation. Because in the end, it's still founded upon the essential things that the full-blown casinos are founded upon. And that is, I'll be happy to give you $10 and buy a couple tickets in hopes that I'll win that barbecue grill. It's still the same principle. And whether something is a full-blown issue or the initial building blocks of it, it still becomes a problem and a threat to a Christian's life. Any thoughts?
Well, I understand what you're saying there, but I'm gonna be a little tough on it too, because I don't hesitate to tell a young school student that no, I'm not going to buy one of your chances, and this is why I'm not going to buy one of your chances. I'm not going to give them the $10 and say, okay, I don't want the chances, but you use this for your charity and everything. Because in fact, they're still going to go to the next door and they're going to ask the next door if they will buy chances. They need to understand why it's wrong.
I see your point.
And sometimes that's a hard thing to do, especially if the parents are with that child when they're trying to get you to do it. And the other thing is, oftentimes it's your grandchildren or your children that comes home trying to do this. Mm-hmm. We need to take one step further and even be willing to call the teacher and the principal and tell them why this is wrong.
Yeah, there are actually some states where it is illegal to do that, to do it on the school level, for a school to actually have a raffle like that, because it is gambling. When we lived down in Lawton, Oklahoma, for a while we were part of the PTA, And that was one of the issues that came up. Couldn't we raise some money by doing this or that? And the principal reminded the PTA, if I remember my facts correctly, and Ron can kind of maybe catch me up to speed on this, they said based on the law, we could not do anything that would be a gamble. We could sell stuff and we could seek donations, but we could not sell tickets that would be a part of a raffle. Could not do it. So
You see here in Oklahoma right now, you see some of the classes having car washes. And the car washes have to be free. They accept donations,
right.
but they can't charge for it. When I went to school, we had our senior trip, and that was fully funded by the work that we did. There was no lotteries, there was no raffle tickets. We went out and we pulled broom corn, we cleaned houses, we trimmed trees, we did all of this stuff. We earned the money ourselves to go out and have this senior trip.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we need to be teaching our young people today.
Exactly.
Is you work for it, you don't try to get something from someone else.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point.
Yeah,
John.
Paul said, I've always abstained from this. I think people of the world thought I was just cheap, which I am. But I explained it was a matter of principle.
Right. I like that. I need to remember that, Paul. I need to tell that to my kids. It's a matter of principle. I'm not cheap.
Yeah.
You got to work for what you get.
And Chance mentioned that, I guess, on this concept as well. Legally, such things are often called unjust enrichment or no right to profit. So
Interesting.
The legal
Yeah.
term there.
And Rhonda made a point just before that. You wonder how many of these same people who bought the tickets for the chance would, if the kid walked up and said, listen, we're taking donations for our school to do this and this, would be willing to pony up the same money for that. And many of them would not, because there's nothing in it for them, as the old expression goes. Nothing in it for them. Okay, let's see. Rhonda says, based upon the law books of Oklahoma, a raffle is not allowable. However, the principal went on to say that most people, PTAs, churches, etc., do not follow this law. Imagine that. Churches not following the law. Yeah.
I'm guessing there's not too many police officers running around looking for raffle sellers.
Probably not. Too busy arresting or giving tickets to parking on the wrong side of the road the wrong way. I didn't get that, by the way, but that was in the news recently. But more pressing matters, though. Gambling also violates the Bible's teaching on us thinking on proper things. You think about Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Dale, let's read that for just a moment, if you would.
Paul said, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things.
Think about it. Is it noble to make money on the loss or misfortune of other people? Could we say that it is just to risk our hard-earned money on the things of chance? When we lose in that gamble, are we going to have possessed thoughts that are pure and lovely? When we lose, our words and our actions going to be a good report. The thing is, everything that you see at casinos and lottery purchases, etc., and so forth, are in complete contrast to what we're looking at here. Gambling does not help put us in this right frame of mind that as we as Christians should be in. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple. And we'll go on to another point here in just a moment, but oftentimes it's kind of like the study of abortion. You'll have people who are pro-abortion. They'll talk about those rare cases where the mother's life would be in danger. They use that rare case to justify the full-blown abortion that we have today. Well, people do the same thing with gambling. They'll take the rare exception of someone who's not doing it for covetousness, who's not going to get angry, et cetera, and they're going to say, well, it's okay then. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't change the facts. Okay? Any thoughts before we move on?
Well, Randall asked, isn't a pair of kings part of nobility? He said, sorry, just trying to add a little levity there.
That gamble failed. I understand. That's a good point, Randy. And you're a Duval, so you got the Duval sense of humor, and I can appreciate that greatly. But something else, though. You think about this, Dale. The Bible tells us, or at least from biblical teaching, that we're supposed to be good stewards of what God's given to us.
Very true.
Yeah, there are two great parables: the parable of the talents and the parable of the good steward in Luke 16. Both of those parables put forth what seems to be an obvious understanding that a servant is going to be a good steward of those things with which he has been entrusted, and to take your hard-earned I cannot talk tonight. Your hard-earned money. This should be the last time I say it tonight. To take that which God has given you, because we owe all things to God, and to go and to waste it in such a fashion is not being a good steward. Now, some may try to argue that other uses of our money aren't being good stewards as well, but that's not what we're talking about, though. We're talking about gambling. Any thoughts about that?
No, I think God expects us to be a good steward. In fact, that's what those parables tell us, that we are to utilize the abilities that God has given us to provide for our families in such a way that it is an honest effort and of good report.
Exactly. John?
Yeah, I would say that, I would caution as to how far we take that particular concept as you mentioned there.
True.
There's so many other things that we spend our money on that we could say are frivolous and don't do any value.
Right.
I mean, how many lattes can you buy and not say that you're spending money that you really don't need to spend?
Two.
There's the limits too. No. And just a number of other things that we do for entertainment
Exactly.
value alone. If I go to a movie, what am I getting out of the movie? I'm just watching a movie and I get
Right.
some laughs if it's a comedy, or some cries if it's a romance, I guess, or whatever. Not that I see many romance movies, but and I won't admit it if I did. But there's all those types of things that we do spend money on that aren't
Exactly.
really for any great benefit to our family or otherwise. And so I would just say I understand the concept and
Yeah.
the point, but obviously that, as we've looked at, that's not the only thing we're setting on tonight.
That's right.
It's just a piece of the puzzle.
This is like the first one. It's not enough in and of itself to show that gambling is wrong, but it is part of like you said, a puzzle there, which shows the flaws and the pitfalls of gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many comments are coming in now. I can't read them. Alan says, James writes that we are drawn away by our own desires, so doesn't gambling draw us away from things we should be focusing on? Which is a very good point. And then Rhonda, to go along with what I was saying, I think really kind of helps clarify that. Pleasure is not sinful. Sinful pleasure is sinful.
That's right.
Which is a good clarification there on that.
Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and get to the last one. I really think that this last principle that gambling violates, you can actually throw everything else out and hang gambling on this one alone. The others are good principles for us to live by, obviously, and they help us to see the flaws in gambling. But this one we're about to look at, to me, is the greatest nail to put in the coffin, if you would, in regards to gambling. And that is, and this was mentioned earlier in the chat room, gambling feeds off covetousness. That is what it is all about. It's amazing the number of people. When my mother-in-law was living down in Texas, she had some neighbors, and every Monday that's what they looked forward to. They wanted to go across the river and go gamble. It was their way of life. And it's not that they were going to watch a movie every week. It's not that they're going to go watch a play every week. But they went to gamble. Why? Because there's the hope of getting more. They'll go, and sometimes you can always tell with some people whether or not they did good. If they come back from gambling and they're in a bad mood, they did bad. If they come back and they're happy and everything, they did good. And most of the time they come back bad or mad. But let's talk about covetousness for just a moment. John, let's look at Romans 1. We're going to read verse 29 and then verse 32.
Okay. Verse 29 of Romans 1 says, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness. Verse 32, who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them.
All right, we noticed there he makes reference to being filled with covetousness. Dale, the Greek word translated as covetousness here, and you'll see it in the outline, is polenoxia. If you would read that definition for everyone.
Well, it means a desire to have more, always in a bad sense, is used in a general way, as mentioned in Mark 7, verse 22. Excuse me. The real thing is that when you look at enhanced Strong's lexicon, It's a greedy desire to have more. And
Exactly.
That's exactly what covetousness is the greedy desire to have more.
That's exactly right. You're not content with what you have, whether it be material things or money. You always want more. And I recognize it is possible to be covetous, and as the reasons why you work. It is also possible to be driven by covetousness to participate in games. I knew this preacher years ago. He was I'm not going to say he was bragging, but he doesn't gamble at all. But every time there was some sort of stamp card at a grocery store or some sort of thing that you could enter in, he would hit every one of them. I mean, this one fella I knew, he would, instead of, he learned that McDonald's, whenever they did their little Monopoly things, that you could actually write off for Monopoly pieces. You didn't have to buy anything. So he would do that. That can even be driven by covetousness, And so we recognize that. But gambling, there's no doubt, is fueled by this. Any thoughts?
Just a funny one.
Okay.
In the chat room. The chat room is just full of funny tonight. But Paul said, I bet you would close the study with a point about covetousness.
Well, Dale, let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 through 10. Listen to what Paul, the apostle that is, has to say about covetousness.
Paul said, "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites." Verse 10 says, "Nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God."
So he identifies there that even those who are covetous will not inherit the kingdom of God. When we are driven by that, we are not going to be driven to heaven, as it were.
It's interesting too, and it's not perfect in through here, but you notice in the first few, a lot of those can be connected pretty easily: fornication, adultery, homosexual, sodomites, all sexual sins,
Sure,
basically.
exactly.
And then you see the next couple: thieves, covetousness.
Yeah.
And we've talked about how gambling is also a form of taking from
That's
others
right.
what's not yours. And here we have those two terms pretty closely related in this
That's
text.
right. Let him who stole steal no longer, Paul writes, but instead work.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're stealing, it's because you're covetous.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that if you're covetous is what's driving the gambling, which most of the time, as you mentioned, it is, that thievery, something like that, goes hand in hand
Exactly.
with that concept.
Well, Paul makes a point, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. He says there, and note this, and see if this doesn't fit gambling, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and have pierced themselves through with many sorrows." There you see the love of money, and you see greediness. That's the fuel to gambling. I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And in Colossians 3, verse 5, Dale, we can't miss this one.
No, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry.
Exactly. That is exactly right.
And a good indication of that covetousness is the primary emphasis behind someone's gambling. When you look at the lottery and there's a $5 million lottery, what is the prize, the number of people who are buying tickets and how many tickets they're buying like, versus that 50 million, 150 million, or that big, huge one that was recently? They talk about record numbers of people and tickets are sold. Why? Because of covetousness. They see this big money out there. They got to have it.
Exactly. They're not going to bother with the $500,000 one, but man, this is up to $50 million. I got to have a piece of that.
Yeah.
And that's what drives
Just another
them.
good evidence of that.
As I
Exactly.
mentioned, they can go to the zoo and get mauled by a polar bear and a common bear on the same day, and they'd have a better chance.
That's right. In the chat room earlier, and I need to bring this one out just for the record. I love my wife's admission. I was using the example of someone mailing off to get the free game pieces, and she said, "You bought the stamp to mail off, just a point of contention, And the Bible says it's better to dwell in the corner of a rooftop than in the house with a contentious woman. So I'll agree completely with her.
So is she
But
saying,
that's right.
Is she saying that you bought the stamp? Or
No,
she
no, no,
bought
no.
the
In the
stamp?
reference to the person, the
Oh,
story,
okay.
that it was not me to do that.
Okay.
No. She goes on to say, the point being the man that sent for the Monopoly pieces bought 2 stamps, one to send the self-addressed stamped envelope in, and one on the self-addressed stamped envelope. So could you say he was gambling? Kind of jokingly about it, but yes, in the matter of speaking, I mean, you're supposed to be able to go to the store and say, give me a game piece, because it would be gambling if the only way you could get it was by the purchase of a drink. Then you would be purchasing. But in that case, they would say, but you're buying a product. You're not buying simply the ticket, but the product. And so, different ways around it, I guess, or attempts to. Any other thoughts, John?
Well, Randall just pointed back again, as we mentioned earlier, that Alan's original point about gambling being linked to addiction being a very valid point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you have people who have lost their homes, their lives, their families due to gambling, and it never would have happened had they never taken the first steps and never made that first purchase.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were talking about that Sunday morning sermon was on what does the Bible say about alcohol, and we'll talk about that later in our study here. But again, you would never become an alcoholic if you never took the first drink. And you would never become addicted to gambling. You would never lose all that money if you never engaged in it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And the final point we close there, at least at this point, is that it is idolatry. And people go to the temples of the god of money, and they bow down and they put their money into the machine, they pull the thing, and hopefully he will bless them with some great money. And 9 times out of the 10, that's not the case at all. You could really see that being an idealistic worship. Just a little bit, you could see that, just a little bit of work. So let's kind of bring this to a close here and look at what does the Bible say about gambling. These are the points that we looked at tonight, and you'll see these on the screen there in front of you. Gambling is not a recognized means of receiving gain. Again, we said, it's a small point, but it's still a significant point, okay? Gambling does not foster a Christian walking properly towards those who are not Christians. Go back to the things that we talked about. Sets the wrong example. It would be a great time for us to set a good example. Yeah.
Gambling does not encourage a Christian to think on proper things.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you lose, you're angry.
That's right.
When you go to gamble, you're thinking about how much you can get.
That's right.
And it's all about that covetousness desire. That's what you're thinking about.
That's right. And you go home stewing because of all the money you lost. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be fuming about it for a couple of days there. Yeah.
And gambling is clearly not a good use of one's money and finances.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's one of the more obvious ones that most financial people will tell you is one of those thoughts.
If a 1.5-year-old kid knows it, then we should know it.
Kind of computer aided, I suspect there. But, and Dale, what was the last thing we learned about gambling?
Gambling feeds on and promotes covetousness.
That's exactly right. If people would stop coveting after money and riches, all the casinos would dry up and they would go out of business. I don't see that happening, but it would happen. Yeah. So the question we have for you as we pull this to a close is quite simple. Were you convinced by this lesson? If maybe you were under the impression that gambling's fine as long as it's kept in proper proportions and everything, what do you think now? Would you be willing to say that it's okay that if I set myself to a certain limit, that it's okay if I go out and gamble? Or would you be willing to say there's no point? There's no point to that. The Bible does not give me the allowance as a Christian to live my life in such a fashion. Look at that very deeply and look at it with an honest heart there. Well, we come to the time of our study, and I'm still trying to polish off the closing way I close the broadcast. So, gentlemen, any final thoughts or comments?
I have no final thoughts other than the fact that hopefully, well, first off, I appreciate all of the comments in the chat room.
Yes.
And even the humor in the chat room. And we had some new folks on there tonight. I saw that, I believe Brother Benny was on there tonight.
Yeah, I think Craig was on. Craig Benny was on there, I believe.
Yeah, and a few other folks that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, Cynthia, somebody there I see.
Certainly glad to see those individuals participating. And
and some of the old ones, or regulars. Not old ones, but regulars.
Yeah, the regulars. And the good questions that we had tonight, too.
That's exactly right, yeah. John, any thoughts? Anything else you want to bring in?
I enjoyed the study. Appreciate it.
Yep, same here. I was looking at Chance, one last comment. He says, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 6 and verse 9. Something to think about. Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us for our study. Please join us again next Tuesday night as we continue in this study. What does the Bible say about? Check back on this page in a couple days, and I'll have the teaser up telling you what our next subject topic will be. Thank you very much, and Lord willing, we will see you back here again next Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. at scripturalway.org.